Well, hello, everybody. Thank you again for joining our monthly webinar with Succurri. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that should be exciting for every business owner that hasn't broken through the $5 million a year annual revenue goal that they have for themselves. And what's interesting to me about this conversation is that we're going to be talking to two IT experts about this. So interesting perspective when you think about it. Hi, Grant. Hi, Andrew. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well. Thank
Doing
you,
good,
Tony.
thank you.
So, as everybody knows, or maybe they don't know, Sakuri, we talk a lot about a ton of topics out on our YouTube channel. I'll give you the QR code for that in a second. Um, but today, this is around IT leadership, or centered on IT leadership, and how IT leaders should be supporting your business at getting through that $5 million a year barrier and leading up to that. So making sure we get into that. Here's the QR code to go to our YouTube channel. We put a ton of great information out there. Andrew and Grant are both not only technology experts, but very, very experienced business growth experts in a lot of different ways. So make sure you go out there, subscribe to it so you can get our videos. We don't spam you with a bunch of stuff. Really try to keep it valuable to business owners and senior managers out there. So go out there, take a look, and don't forget to like and subscribe, of course. All right, so let's get going a little bit today. Breaking the $5 million revenue barrier. Um, we're going to talk about things like admin debt and how to scale departments and what kind of information you need to look at and how do you set up what we call instrumentation and what even that means. But before we get going, Andrew, maybe you can kind of outline why did we choose this topic? Why aren't we talking about IT stuff?
Yeah, so surprisingly, this is actually a very technology heavy conversation. So, most businesses that get to that $5 million a year of revenue, they find that they hit a ceiling and it's really hard to move past it. They assume it's an operational issue, and to some extent it is, but it's a combination of multiple things like mindset, operations, and oftentimes the real solution is actually in technology and leveraging that technology to get your organization to go to the next level. And
So the
so,
sim we
yeah.
we often deal with the symptoms, right? It's like, oh, I've got a cold. The medical symptoms. I've got a cold, snuffly, a nose, runny nose. Well, in business, the symptoms are different, right? Hey, we might not be hitting our sales targets. Um, you know, a bunch of things are confusing among teams. Like why are three people saying the different thing, a different thing when we're trying to get something done? So the first part of this chaos, like, and I just intentionally threw a bunch of this stuff on the screen to kind of represent some of those things. But talk to me about admin debt.
Yeah, so admin debt shows itself up in a lot of these different ways, right? Your people own your knowledge. There's a process that's dependent on a person, constant interruptions, decisions you can't trust. These are all things that come, that get categorized under admin debt. And so basically, admin debt is when your organization and the people that work in your organization are working on tasks that are ultimately not providing a lot of value to the organization. They might be important, but they're not things that actually move your organization further ahead. And so, some examples that business owners or decision makers run into is a lot of those folks are oftentimes founders of their original organization, and they're working off of mindset and knowledge and processes for a company that might have been a 5-person company, and now they're maybe a 30-person company. And so this admin debt is basically the things one collects on their puts on their plate to get done that they probably shouldn't. So, like for an owner, really an owner should be working on growing the business, working on the business, not in the business. So we find that owners oftentimes will be doing tasks that they can do, but they shouldn't do, right? Like the owner's cleaning up the kitchen at the end of the day because they don't want to hire a cleaner. Owners are doing the day-to-day work that they probably should be hiring somebody to do because they don't have a way to train somebody, or the person they just trained just left the company. They also run into situations where maybe the owner has a really trusted person doing the work, but that person isn't good at sharing their information. And so you can't add another person, right? You can't add more resources to grow the business. And so what we do is at Succurri, we help our customers recognize that admin debt. And oftentimes there's several technology solutions to help you get past that.
So if I can play back to you, the admin debt is really those things maybe you feel like as an owner or a senior level executive that you can do, and you find yourself going, well, I should just do that if I want it done right. And the
Correct.
debt the debt in terms of time that you're spending on those things versus time you could be investing in higher value level um, activities, that debt piles up, and then you're spending too much time on those debt items versus high value activities.
100%. Like it's very common when you're like specifically in the service industry that if you, as an owner, you're oftentimes one of the highest qualified providers in your organization. You might be a doctor, a dentist, IT provider. And so you have these really advanced skill sets, and there's every day there's always something the business needs you for. But that's helping one patient, one customer, one specific need. And if your day gets filled with those, oftentimes what owners or decision makers will do is they'll say, well, I'll get to the strategy, I'll get to that thing later. We never get to it, right? There's always a mountain of tasks that are low value. They're important, but they're low value. So when an owner or a decision maker is focused on those low value tasks day in and day out, they don't spend any time growing the business by focusing on strategy, focusing on, yeah, well, we can talk about that. How do we get rid of the low value debt? So
Yeah, yeah, that's where I
they
was headed is what do you do to remove it? And
yeah,
they're listed here, but help people make the connection between why an IT managed service company can help with some of these things.
really. So the technology, IT services companies like Succurri, we can help customers put in place technology that is the backbone of solving a lot of these problems, right? One, if you can help a customer at least talk through their tasks and maybe do a little time audit with them, we can figure out then what tasks they're doing that are low value and what they're doing that's high value. We then help the customer focus on getting rid of those low value tasks. And oftentimes you can look at it and maybe you automate, you use AI, or you help them with a business system they're not using thoroughly. And so all of a sudden, these tasks that they're doing day in and day out can start to go away. We also help customers use technology to create standard knowledge bases, right? So they're creating SOPs, standard operating procedures. These are written documents that are the playbooks for their company. Oftentimes, these documents are missing or not easily accessible to all staff members. There's a ton of technologies to help companies document operating procedures. AI is really great at that right now. We have customers that use AI scribing tools to very rapidly document procedures in their company. So once knowledge is documented and a process is documented and it's accessible to staff members, it makes the process of growing your company so much faster. I kind of touched on it, but it's the centralization of that data so that all team members are seeing exactly the same documentation. You're reducing the interpretation. So now all team members are doing it the Succurri way or the Boeing way or the Microsoft way, and you're getting really consistent outcomes. And then what we can do is we can put in place the technology that builds those systems so you can reproduce this day in and day out, right? You don't want the owner or even staff members doing low value tasks. It's not just the owner or the decision maker in the company, it's all staff members. If you have mid-level staff members doing tasks that are below their skill set, that's admin debt for them as well. And so when we put in place systems like business systems, it might be an EMR in a clinic, it might be an ERP system in a manufacturing firm. When you have a system like that in place, it really provides the muscle and the backbone that your team needs to do their jobs consistently every day and grow your business much faster.
I think of spreadsheet hell, right? Everybody, I
Yep.
think almost every business has gone through this where everybody has their own spreadsheet. Then they have a centralized spreadsheet, or they have two or three spreadsheets with multiple tabs. And there's all these things that are happening. And then you have to do programming to make it all work. And um, what I like about how you guys think about things is, well, let's think through this problem and there's probably other businesses we've helped solve the same problem. It's just new to you. And it seems so daunting. And how do you even come about it, right? So there's a lot of solving problems. Uh, there's a lot of problem solving that you guys do in just the way you think about things, which is using technology to help solve those issues.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we're doing this series on business strategy and business related topics, but tying it back to technology, leveraging an IT provider like Succurri that doesn't just fix your computers, but helps guide your company through the navigation of the strategy, the outcomes, the goals they're looking for. We can help a company that is in that spreadsheet hell and they find that it's daunting. We've been through that many, many times with customers. We know the path. And so if you can have a guide, as a business, if you can bring someone like a trusted IT advisor on and they can guide you through this, navigating these challenges so that you're not burning energy on it and you're getting the right solution the first time, it's worth every penny. And so that's one of the ways that Succurri differentiates itself is that we bring that level of strategic value to our customers so that when they come to the goal is they come to us first, or they even let us sit at the leadership table and we help advise as they're making their strategies.
Yeah, I'll talk to you about a conversation I had with an operations manager at about a $2 million a year business just today. And he's like, I've got this one guy who just he has all the institutional knowledge. How do we separate that person from that problem? And it's an interesting conversation. Maybe we can get into that a little bit. Because I absolutely know there are other businesses out there that are going to watch this that hear that, and it's like, how do we attack that a little bit? What initiative, what investment do we need to make? um,
Yeah,
we've kind
and
of
I can just briefly touch base. We see that very frequently. We call that personality type the kingdom builder, and that person intentionally or unintentionally makes themselves so important and so valuable that the company can't run without them. And we've seen it go badly where they leverage that to hold the company hostage in for different ways for salaries or raises or just to be a mean person. We see it from the other side where they're just really qualified and they want to do a good job and they can't say no. And so, in that scenario, if I was to advise that person, I would let them, one, determine is this person malicious or is this person just really good and can't say no? Both of the tactics ultimately have the same outcome or the same solution, which is the leader of the organization needs to say, we're having an initiative where we're going to document everything every process in this company. And they don't make it specific to the kingdom builder, but they just say, this is our initiative. They lay out a plan of like, we're going to have this department, this department. These are going to be the things we'll document. And if they can come with a plan, it's really hard for a kingdom builder to say no. They won't want to do it because they want to keep their data. That's how they get validation is having that knowledge. But if there is a plan by the leadership that says each department is going to document these specific processes and we're going to use these tools and the output, the documentation is going to look this way, it's
yeah,
really hard for them to say no. And if they say no, ultimately the business owner knows right away they've got a problem. And so
yeah,
if you have a malicious kingdom builder, it's time to hire somebody in addition and start having them learn the process as fast as possible. If you have a cooperative kingdom builder, they should usually do the job and actually create the documentation. The business owner just has to hold them accountable and has to know that, sometimes when you shake the tree, a little fruit falls off, and you might lose that person.
Yeah.
You may have to learn those things quickly, but it's better to know it today at your time frame versus the kingdom builder's time frame, which could leave you in the lurch.
Yeah. Yeah. So as so I just we just you just went through like wall, one part of a wall that people might hit or companies might hit. Um, Talk to me about this process, because I think a lot of business owners out there think, oh, we're going to hire a consultant, or we're going to hire a managed service company, or we're going to hire a marketing agency, and that's going to solve all of our problems. And whether it's somebody internal that's helping make improvements or somebody external, they all kind of have to go through the same process. And so walk me through a little bit, and maybe Grant, this is where you come in, but it's really an iterative process. It's not just a one time you get it right and then you're done.
No, I'm like, I
Stop
think
laughing.
yeah, I'm laughing because I think I'm like on version 5 or 6, right?
Right.
And failure is not only an option, it's a necessity, I think, because you need to kind of figure out through your different iterations what you're looking for. Now, I'm not saying like catastrophic failures, right? I'm saying
Yeah, yeah.
there's ways to shortcut that. In fact, I've had a couple different interesting conversations over the last week. Um, on similar concepts of different ways to shortcut it and like, hey, learn from my mistakes. These are the things that I recommend you do. And you hope that they rethink the thought process, right? They're like, oh, yeah, that wasn't something I thought about in the past. And you're making me rethink it. You're like, cool. All right. You're going down the right path versus, no, I really just like, I just want to have a kind of a short-term stopgap, right? And okay, that's fine, but you're now, maybe you weren't in Excel spreadsheet or spreadsheet hell, and you're putting yourself there. And I'm like, Stop. Before you go down that path, you're gonna have to change this process in a year or two because you're creating yourself another wall. Um, and so understanding what your final goal looks like what are you trying to achieve, and then working your way back. That's an exercise that Andrew and I went through over the last couple of years of like, okay, how do we get to where we want to go? And then you reverse engineering. So defining that data, what is that information that I need to have to be able to hit those goals? And then having the process that's repeatable to be able to hit those goals. And so I'll give you a little example. And I'm obviously, I come from, on these videos, I'm a security expert, but the reality is that I actually deal with a lot of sales and marketing. And so I'll talk about the sales process. And so it, having to bring in new salespeople, right? You have a timeline of when you get them up and going, and how fast you get them up and going is how fast you start bringing value back to that specific initiative, the dollars that you're spending on that employee. And in iterations in the past, I was taking, 4, 5, 6 months to starting to get some traction with a new sales person. And over the time of defining the data I was looking for and documenting the process and refining that process over and over again, I'm now in more like a 6 week, 2 month process where I'm actually starting to see significant reproducible results. And so you look at that from just that small scenario on just sales alone, and you start using that in other departments. That's a ton of savings, like in the tunes of hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on your multiplier. I had an interesting conversation, and kind of going back to committing and then going to committing to systems. Like, pick your system, right? Stick with it, do your research, get somebody that knows the business and knows technology to help you with that. Because every time you switch to a new system, one, you have to rebuild your system, you have to remove all your documentation in your process, you have to retool everything, right? Uh,
Hmm.
your centralized system isn't just like, oh, this is going to solve all my problems. Like, no, you have to build everything into it. And so I actually had a conversation today, and I had to check. I'm like, is he on this call? I don't want to talk bad about it. And I'm not talking bad, but it's a common thing that I hear all the time of uh, this person had gone through and retooled systems 2 or 3 times over the
Right.
last 2 years. And I said, what does that cost your business? He said, probably $1 million.
Yeah.
$1 million in 2 years. Like that's unconceivable to me, right? And that's because when somebody's not, you don't have the people to help you through that process of making the right decision, making sure it has all the things that you need, or evaluating the systems that you're in to see if they're capable of doing what you're trying to accomplish. People look at buying hope, right? They're going to buy that system that looks awesome. The salesperson does a great job of saying, "Yep, it's going to do everything you want it to." The reality is that you're lucky if you get 80% of what the salesperson told you was actually going to do, right?
Yeah.
I'm in sales. Like I try to deliver 98% of what I told them I was going to be able to do, but most of the time it's about 80%. And then you're lied to about how much it's going to cost to implement it. Right. And so every time you do that, because you're buying hope that this system is going to solve all your problems, but you don't put the time in to make it work and you don't put the time in to build your business in it, then basically you're just going to go look for the next system in the hopes that the new system will fix all your problems. And the answer is you're going to continue to buy forever. And it's at the tune of millions and millions of dollars. And so I'm just going to tell you right now, pick one, stick with it, and really build out your processes. It may not solve 100% of your problems, but it's probably going to solve 95% of them. Um, you
It's
know,
also a lot of asking a lot of questions when you first start out. You know, you ask a
yeah.
question, you find the answer, but that answer to that question is like opens up three other doors you got to go figure out.
Well, and I think one of this is something I've figured out over time, and I think Andrew's figured this out in the systems that he works in, is that you look for some easy wins. What are some of the things that I need to solve today? And not look at it from, oh my God, like I'm not utilizing half of the system and I'm gonna turn around like it's so expensive. I'm gonna get out of it because I'm not utilizing it. It's like, no, you chose it because you're able to build into it. And so for example, like the CRM platform I'm in, like I've been in it for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, and I'm really now starting to utilize it because the data is flowing from where I need it to. And it's the information is now much more valuable. Where it was just a CRM before. Now it's a whole sales tool. Um, and same with like our back end systems where all our ticketing goes. We use ConnectWise, but whatever, PSA. Um, we that was a decision we made a long time ago that we didn't want to change the wheels on the bus while it was in motion. So we bought the 800-pound gorilla,
Yeah.
but it can grow with us, right? We're not going to have to change that system again. It's scalable to a much, much larger company than we are, or, significantly much larger. And so it has all the functions, may have been, more than we needed at the time, but we're now where we need to be. So committing to a system, staying with it, I think is really important. Um, the documenting, the processing, but the training, that piece of once you get into these platforms and you develop your process, you have to train your staff. You have to take the time. It's not like, oh, here you go, let's go figure it out, right? Um,
Or go to the help page for this application,
yeah,
software. Yeah.
yeah. If you develop your processes and then you use those processes for your training, and maybe throw a little bit of AI in there for your document to hold all your documentation, and then reinforce that for every new employee, and that is where you go to for everything. And then the small tweaks happen at the process level, the documentation level. That'll avoid having all these little kingdom builders that have institutional knowledge here and there that nobody else knows about, and you have to go to that one guy or that one girl because they're the only ones that know how to make that one thing work, right? You have to bring it back into the institutional knowledge.
Yeah.
Uh, and then the measurement of performance, right? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so the analytics on how all this is working, I'll go back to the sales concept. Like if I didn't know how many calls my inside sales reps were making, I wouldn't know, that's baseline, right? That's just showing up to work. But then I need to know
Yeah.
how many people they're talking to. And then I need to know how many conversations from there are actually, good conversations. And then at that point, that's where the start of the sales funnel comes from. And so those are numbers that I can measure and watch on a regular basis. And keep in mind, like that's one small metric for our entire company. Like Andrew has, another 200, 300 metrics that he looks at in terms of service delivery. But you have to be able to get this information into a spot where you can actually pay attention to what's going on. And then maybe even have a little business process automation to help you move some things around, or some AI that kind of throws some alarms and saying, hey, when this happens, do this, right? But that gets a little bit more tricked down the line. But you have to get that information centralized so you can measure it.
Yeah. What's interesting to me too is as your business grows, there's more moving parts. And so you might have specialty people that are working in different parts of the business, like you mentioned, sales and marketing. If you deliver services, that's one thing versus produce a product, that's another thing. Those different business models, whether it's a service company or a product company and how they market and sell. The thing that's interesting to me about what you guys have done is evolved yourselves to a place where, yeah, we can handle the network stuff and yeah, we can handle the help desk stuff. And that is part of IT. But really, you've gotten to a point where I need to understand what you're doing in your business and trying to do in your business and trying to improve. And let's leverage the technology knowledge that we have in different industry applications and different experiences we have across our client portfolio to help you resolve the business problem, right? If sales is the business problem and you have a sales system, but you don't have it, let's say, connected with other systems so information flows back and forth, we can really help you streamline that. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that what I'm seeing? And are
Yeah.
other IT companies doing that?
Well, yeah. So kind of to go back to your like, yeah, we can handle networks, we can handle, computers and help desk. I like to put that as kind of the example of when it comes to IT, that's like showing up to work, right? That is the bare minimum of entry for employment when it comes to being an IT provider, that you can manage a network, you can do help desk. Um,
Right.
I'm not even saying that that's even doing it very well, right? There's an art to uh, network management. There's an art to help desk, and not everybody does that great. Um, I like to think that we're really good at it. And Andrew does a great job at managing all that, and but that comes from the instrumentation, right? Paying attention to where we have pressure in certain areas and be able to make adjustments when we see things that are out of whack or not quite in scope. Um, but yeah, so I think that the newer, the modern version of an IT provider requires that next level. It requires the business acumen. It requires the consultant side of it, understanding what your business is trying to accomplish, and then utilizing technology to achieve those goals, versus the other way around, where back, even as recently as today, I was having a conversation that like the IT providers are trying to throw technology at the problem, but not understand what the problem actually is. Like, oh, we'll just use this as what everybody else is using. And the reality is like, no, you have to understand, like, what are you trying to achieve? Where are you starting? You starting here and you're trying to get here. Let's work through that process and then decide what technology is going to be required for that. And it might be AI, maybe not. It might be business process automation. Maybe it's just something as simple as business analytics.
Yeah.
Or it's a collection of all of them together to getting to the outcomes that you're looking for. But yeah, so network, that's just the starting entry point of being a provider.
Well, and remember the conversation here is how do you get past that $5 million a year barrier? And part of that means having a process for doing this and getting better at this kind of thing, streamlining systems, automating systems, um, removing that kind of debt. Um, let's you okay. So I think, I don't know if you just mentioned it, but you've mentioned it before, where one of the real critical pieces is getting systems to talk to each other, information to flow back and forth. But I think on one of the earlier slides, we talked about if I only had the numbers, or these numbers, I don't know if we trust these numbers. Talk to me about how getting better intelligence with these systems, and what should we be looking for? I mean, we listed out kind of every business has these same systems, right?
Yeah, and I'll let Andrew run with this one, but I did kind of want to point out that if you look at each key system, the only differentiator of every company basically is production and service, right? And so at the start of this conversation, you kind of asked like, hey, why is it that we have two IT experts talking about business? And the reality is that Andrew and I are business owners, and to the point of more business owners than we are IT now, right? Because we have to match our numbers just like every other business owner does. And we look at we are using the same systems or the same processes that other businesses use to produce a similar outcome. It just happens to be that our product or our service is IT delivery. And so with
Right.
that, Andrew, I'll let you run with it.
Yeah, certainly. And you're so very correct, Tony, that if you don't have that business intelligence, the reporting, the numbers, you just can't make good informed decisions. I'll go back to Grant's example of the sales process. So, like we're building a sales process, and we didn't realize how nuanced it was. And we're like, oh, you just have a certain amount of leads and you're going to close a percentage of those and you're done. Well, we found out that wasn't the case. And so when like in the sales system, we needed to know a lot of details. We needed to know, so like if we weren't getting the sales we were looking for, we needed to know how many leads, how many of them are qualified, how many do we know that we've had conversations with, how many of those conversations are a fit. And so you have all these little like checkpoints in the sales process and the sales system that you then can use to go back and correct problems, right? If you're not getting the output, which is closed deals, you can go back and look at the sales system, and it provides you with this business intelligence, these reports that you can say, oh, well, we don't have enough decision maker conversations, but that's because we don't do enough phone calls. Or we do enough phone calls, but our calls don't have enough they're not getting through to the decision maker. So maybe we have bad phone numbers. Like that's some really nuanced information that gives you the ability to make actionable changes at a very specific level versus, oh, I'm not getting the sales I want. Go make it better. Right. And there's nothing actionable about that statement. You're like, I hope I can fix it. Right. How many sales managers have been fired because the owner of the company says, you better get more sales or you're out? Well, if that sales manager can't figure out where in their sales process they have a breakdown, they can't fix it. And so every department has exactly the same thing, right? Marketing, we want to have a certain amount of hits on our webpage and a certain amount of SEO and a certain amount of AI referrals. In the service and production, you want to have a certain amount of service delivery or a certain amount of widgets you make, and you'd get those from your ERP system or your MRP system or your like all the acronyms, right? If you're a medical clinic, you're doing it from
Yeah.
from your medical record system. In finance, same thing. Like you have to have information about your financial status. And it's not just like how much you're making, it's how many dollars have you received, how much is outstanding, and so forth. So all of these systems are super critical as far as telling you information. But if they're all siloed and you don't have any information flowing between, you're missing potential related information you need to make even more informed decisions. And we'll talk about that in a second, which is called instrumentation. But ultimately, yeah, if you can't connect these systems together, you're really missing out on opportunities. So one of the things Succurri helps our customers do is business process integration. And so we will take multiple different systems, we'll write an integration for them. They share information. So maybe now all your customers are the same across all your systems and they synchronize. Or maybe it's you have workflow where your sales process, your marketing process flows to sales, and sales flows to service, and service flows to invoicing. Now all of a sudden you have a workflow that your staff can depend upon, so you can grow a little faster. So these are the things we help customers do, and bridge those, create the bridges between those systems.
So what you guys are,
go ahead.
sorry to interrupt there, Andrew. So what you guys are saying is every business ecosystem has all of these systems within it. The only thing that's different is whether that business is providing services or products. And maybe you do both, but that's when you say that's the differentiator, that's what you mean. And so all of these systems have to function similarly in different businesses, but the process and the data within them can be different.
Correct. And Grant and I built our careers on understanding our customers' business flow. And the reason we can do that across many different industries is business flow is the same in every industry, except when you get to production or service. So we already know how the marketing, sales, finance, IT, HR, all of that flows the same in every single business. When you get to the production and service side, then you have to become a little more knowledgeable. But really, production and service are the same in every business. You just have different names, right? So service is in a medical clinic is patients. In IT, it's service tickets. In a law firm, it's clients. But you still are doing the same process. You're doing something for revenue. You have a certain outcome. Production is the same thing no matter what you're producing. If it's a widget or a whole airplane, it might be more complex, but it's ultimately the same workflow. And so Grant and I have gotten to the point where we can sit down for 15 to 30 minutes with a business owner talking about their business. And oftentimes they will tell us everything we need to know about the production and service, production or service in their business. And we can tell them if their business software is a fit. I had a company, an opportunity to speak with a company that's in manufacturing. And one of the things they talked about is they have a really hard time producing consistent results without like it being a small group of people who do the work, and they don't get good outputs of business intelligence. And I said, well, what business system are you using? And they said, well, we bought this one, it was recommended to us, but I don't think it's not really, it's manufacturing, it's not the job shop, and so they don't use it. I went and looked at it a little bit later. It's actually a really well supported system. It had all the functions they needed. And within like 30 minutes of me doing a little research, I went back to them with just some recommendations on, hey, this system will actually do what you want it to do. And if you can commit to it, you will probably see some significant changes. So that was a very nominally technical conversation that had like very much outsized business value for that provider or for that business owner.
Let me ask you something, because earlier we talked about switching systems has a big time cost, and avoid switching systems like the plague, right? Just get better at the system you have that you're committed to. Is there ever a time when you go, nope, we gotta swap this out? What comes up? How's that work?
Yeah, it's oh, Greg, you might be muted.
Yeah, I was muted. I was going to say that there's definitely a time to switch, right? I think we talked about it a little earlier when you're in Excel spreadsheet hell. You're stunted, right? You're not even in a system. You're in a process that was for a 5-person company that you maybe grew to 25, 30, maybe more, but like you're not getting any of the business analytics that you need. There's no way to be able to see how your business is doing. You can't see through the forest because the trees are in the way, kind of thing, because every single job that you have is on a spreadsheet, and your business isn't ran on, you can't run your business on multiple spreadsheets. In other cases, the business systems are just not designed for what you're trying to do, right? Like you should have had a truck and you bought a hatchback, right?
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends. And that's something that Andrew and I go through. Like I said, 15, 20 minutes, I could tell you really quickly what system you're in, if it's going to fit for you or not. Um, and then sometimes people buy very customized, very industry specific systems that just, you know, they haven't put the time into it, right? And so they're like,
Mhm.
yeah, this doesn't work for me. And to Andy's point is that if you commit and you build your company into it, it'll do 95% of what you're trying to do. Let's find a way to augment the other 5% to get you the information you need.
Right. Right. Um, we didn't really get into leading and lagging indicators and how often you should be looking at this information. Um, I think really it's not like what's the best decision, it's what's the next decision you have to make with this information. How do you guys look at leading and lagging indicators? What can you tell? Or is it really, it depends on where that business is? How do you guys look at that?
Yeah, I can jump in there. So, leading versus lagging indicators are really an indicator of your operational maturity of your organization. So, a lagging indicator is data that tells you about the past. So you can see how your performance was, but ultimately it's a reactive measurement. A leading indicator is a predictive information, or it is a proactive decision that you're making. You are navigating into the future confidently based upon information that you believe will become true. And so oftentimes what we'll see is there's a couple evolutionary steps here. There is a stage where you have no indicators because you have no reports, business intelligence, or numbers that you can gather, right? That's oftentimes Excel hell. There's just too many, they're all separate and you can't get it, you can't get the information you have. So no indicators whatsoever is like lowest level of efficiency. Lagging indicators come in next, and they're way better than nothing. So you can predict, or you can look at what you've done to see if there were some problems, and it can help inform your future decisions. But ultimately, like I said, it's reactive. You're not navigating forward successfully. You're just looking backwards to see if there was something you could do better. When you can get to the leading indicators, now you're driving your organization into a clear, focused direction forward towards a goal. And so getting that information from various business systems, you have to have all these systems on this spreadsheet connected and flowing together to get that high level business intelligence to get leading indicators. We talked about this yesterday at Succurri. We do something very similar, but for our customers. So we tie together all of our IT management tools and we feed them into a reporting system. And that gives us the ability to predict for our customers their IT needs up to 7 years in the future. So all of a sudden, instead of being reactive and something breaks and they have to buy it today, we now give them a budget annually that tells them what they need to purchase so they don't have that downtime and they can make sure that they have the money available. So now we've taken a reactive, expensive disruption and turned it into a proactive, informed decision that they can have some time and control over. And if you can do that in your business, all of a sudden, you're the one who's leading the pack, or you're getting to your goals versus your competitors are always looking at their lagging indicators, or they're stuck in spreadsheet hell and they're not moving forward. They're moving backwards.
Well, it becomes easier to get into the investment mindset versus like the I gotta figure out this expense
Mm-hmm.
mindset. And if you haven't gone through it before, it's this amazing transformation when you're looking at each of these systems, marketing, sales, production, finance, IT, HR, all of those things. When you can say, look, here from an IT perspective, a technology perspective, given the environment, given what we use, given how we use it, here's likely what we're going to spend and when we likely might need to invest a little bit more. So it's almost like, I don't know if you watch American football. It's like the quarterback when they're leading the receiver with the pass. you know, you know where that person's going to be, when they're going to be there. So I'm going to get the ball there so that by the time they get there, they catch the ball in that spot. And it's like that only with money in a business is the
Yeah.
way I describe it. And the fact that you guys can do that is really, really powerful kind of thing. Because each department kind of wants to know that too, especially when you get to a place where you're asking department leaders, well, what do you need for budget this year or this quarter? Oh, well, I don't know, you know.
Yeah. And
So,
companies that use leading indicators win, and staff want to work at companies that win. And so that's one of the things too, is as a company, as you're scaling and you hit that threshold, is one of the reasons you don't go past 5 million a year is you need really highly qualified people and really good people. And good people want to work at companies that win.
yeah. So you mentioned this earlier, this word instrumentation. How is this different than business intelligence?
So Grant and I can both talk on this. So instrumentation is a concept that we're still working at Succurri. But if you think of each department, like we'll think of like a really big boiler heating system, right? You got your boiler, you got your pipes, you have all of your radiators throughout the building. Each one of those things needs to be running just perfectly so that the whole system runs correctly. And that's really what you can do with your business. So if your business is one big system, that has a whole bunch of different components. It has marketing, sales, service, and production. It has finance. It has IT. Each one of those specific departments has unique tuning requirements. And so you figure out over time what your best practices are for that specific department, what you want the outcomes to be, what you want your goals to be. You then use your business intelligence or your reporting to monitor that each of those departments is doing what they're supposed to do. And so if you like, we use the boiler, like you're turning knobs at each department to make sure that it's working. So, to give you an example, if the sales department is crushing it and bringing in tons of sales, they're kind of like the furnace of the boiler system, right? Or they're the boiler. They're hot and they're pushing a lot of really hot pressurized water. But if downstream the service department is like a radiator and it's not ready, it has a leaky gasket or it has a rusty valve, that radiator might blow up. And so, no matter how great your sales department is, if your service department's not ready to take that volume of sales and deliver successfully, your system is going to have a rupture and you're going to blow up somewhere. Oftentimes, this happens to every business. This happened to us many times. What happens instinctually is you really pull back, right? So, oh, we got to stop the sales process because the service isn't working, or we got to slow down. And that's when your business lurches forward and then 2 steps backwards, and then maybe a
Right.
step forward and 3 steps backwards. You never want to go backwards. You always want to go forward. So, so that's how we see instrumentation is every system has to be in alignment with each other so you can pass information through it.
So is it your assertion that businesses now, aside from whether they deliver product or service, pretty much have the same need for inputs and data across each system?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, maybe Grant, you can talk about how it's so critical at the sales and marketing, at the top of that instrumentation system to make sure that the data is flowing correctly.
Yeah. So the answer to your question is yes, Tony. Every company needs to have that data flowing, right? And so if you think of, you're going to like the top of the funnel, right, in the sales process, and what pops out as a shiny new client. Uh, what do you do with that client once you get them, right? You have to be able to get that information over into the next system that then supports that client. And so you have to have that flow of information from one to the other. And every time that you have a manual input, there's a risk of something being done wrong. And the moment that something's done wrong, it starts to impact your customer's experience. And if that experience over time deteriorates, that customer churns. And that's no different in any business, right? And so getting the information to flow not only helps with your efficiencies, but it also helps how the customer perceives you. And as it all flows all the way through from the sales side of it to the service or production side of it to the billing and finance and operations, that has to be really smooth all the way through with no friction, because every time you have friction, now you've got some friction from an employee that's not getting something correct because they don't have the right information, or friction from a customer that's getting frustrated because you're taking time out of their day to solve and you're creating problems for them that you should probably already have solved. So yeah, the answer is that having the information flow all the way through is really, really important, and frictionless flow is really
Right.
important.
And so you have to be able to first understand the processes that are driving each piece of those systems and the collective together.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind, each process in each department or each cog is going to be slightly different, right? But you know how like a car has a clutch, right? To make that transition smooth, you kind of have to have that spot where things are lined up perfectly every single time, and it just connects, and you just hit shift the gear, and then you're off to the races again.
So we'll have another podcast that describes what is a clutch and how to use it.
And so Tony, I think it's really important at this level of an example to kind of highlight some of the things we talked about earlier. So admin debt at its very nature is friction in your instrumentation of your business, right? So that might mean that you can't push data through as fast because you have admin debt at your sales level, right? You can't
Yeah.
process a sales order. You might have,
Somebody, sorry to interrupt there, but what you're saying is somebody in this department is taking on too much admin debt, and so they become a blocker for things getting through fast enough to the rest of the system. Is that,
correct.
yeah?
Yeah. And
Or
then
it could happen back here, like maybe finance isn't paying fast enough, and so we have a vendor or something that doesn't allow us to get the support we need. Whatever it is, it's a
in
blocker, a
Yeah,
friction.
and if you have too much admin debt, it all often shows up in every single department, and so your whole instrumentation system is stuck. It gets stuck and stuck, or you have to push through. So it becomes a real problem. The other side here is, let's say at your service level that you don't have good documentation or good definition of your process. So all of a sudden, you're supposed to spit out a widget and somebody else makes a cog or somebody decides to make a scarf and your customer's like, I wanted a widget, and your salesperson's
Right.
like, I only sell widgets, why are you making scarves and cogs and knitted blankets? Like, this is ridiculous. And so that's what happens. That's another part that prevents the instrumentation from working well, or instrumentation can help you find these problems, is if you don't have documentation of a process and your team isn't trained on how that process works, they're going to create what they want to the best of their abilities. And it might all be widgets, but they might be the wrong sizes or have the wrong shapes. So, so once again, we talked about, admin debt is critical to remove. Process and documentation is critical. We talked about the business intelligence. So, on this picture, we have a lot of gauges, and that's the business intelligence telling us when each one of these little places in our instrumentation are getting overheated, overpressurized, too little pressure, too little flow. And so when you look at your business from this holistic, overarching standpoint, you should be able, like a business that gets past $5 million a year can see where individual departments are falling down. They'll know by their instrumentation and their business data what specifically is going wrong, and they'll fix it by adding process documentation or removing admin debt.
And when you hear the term silos, which we really haven't brought up, it's like, I'm just going to pick support here as an example. You have this piece of machinery that's working. There's a piece of software that they use um, to track their work. They have somebody that's leading that department. They might even have some KPIs or lagging indicators that say, how does this piece work? Oh, well, this piece is working great, but there's no connection to other parts of the business, which might be using totally different software, totally different people, obviously different process. So, these little tubes that are connecting each of these, that's where you talk about information flow. So now the left hand talks to the right hand. Am I getting that?
100%. I mean, if you're siloed, you're standalone. So basically, in this picture, you'd pull out the support module, and basically anything that flowed out of sales is just going to dump on the floor. And you hope
Right.
somebody picks it up and puts it into the sales support section.
Yeah.
So you have to have those connections. And I consider those silos to be really, we call it technical debt, but it's similar to admin debt, where somebody hasn't made the decision to prioritize connecting that system and taking it out of the silo. And so
Right.
you have technical debt. You have sales departments spilling customers onto the floor, and you're hoping somebody's picking them up. Well, that's not good. That's not a well pressurized system.
Right. So you mentioned, um, you know, you didn't say the word priorities, but somebody didn't make the decision to commit to making this a priority, and it really all starts with company leadership. Um, how do you change that as an IT provider, or how do you approach that? Maybe that's a better question.
Yeah, Grant,
So,
you talk with new companies all day long. So let's,
yeah, it's really it's a top-down problem, right? And it starts at the ownership and it starts at the management level, and that's where that decision has to be made. Um, and and that you have to from an ownership perspective, you have to understand what the cost is for not doing something, and what that impact looks like. And then if you do make a decision, you have to blend that into the culture. So Andrew made a comment about, okay, we're going to have every department create SOPs for how the department is ran. If that comes down from the ownership and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, and you start getting kickback from employees that are like, nope, that's not part of my job description. I'm not going to do that. Um, the management has to stand behind that decision, because if you don't, nothing's going to take place. And then you'll have other employees that are like, well, Bob decided not to do it, so maybe I don't have to do it, right? And then now you have a culture of we're just not going to do it, and the initiative fails. Same problem in cybersecurity as well, right? If those initiatives from the top down are not followed through from a ownership and management level, and it's not, everybody wants to, like cut a check and have the problem be solved. And a lot of times it's just not that simple, right? You
Yeah.
have to nurture it, you have to build it into your culture, and you have to push it across the finish line. But the only person that's capable of doing that is ownership and management, because they're the only ones that have the authority to be able to do that. Us as IT providers, especially since we're outsourced, we are not the people that can force employees to do things, right? We're not their managers. We're not the police officers of the network. We're consultants, right? Like, hey, this is what we recommend you do. And you get an owner that says, yeah, that sounds great. Let's go ahead and do it, sign off on it. And then it goes nowhere because the ownership decides that they're like, well, I had some kickback from a few key employees, and they decided that they're happy with the way that things are working and they don't want to change anything. And I'm like, but it's not their company, it's yours, and you're not happy with the way things are working. You're not getting the information that you need. And
Right.
so that's really where that it has to come from the top down. Like if you own the company and you're a manager of the company, you have to be the one that makes sure it gets across the finish line.
I mean, it pretty much is, that's the way everything should be done. So the way that your company is, I've heard this, I can't remember where I heard this, but the way that your company is running and how happy you are with your company and how well it's doing is a mere reflection of how well you're leading it. And that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes. because it means taking ownership and accountability of the priorities you're setting and where you're. I mean, that's part of being a leader of a company. So um, I see that as something that is a challenge in a lot of different companies, and vice versa. When you have company teams that really get behind the ownership understands their role, and they support the team initiatives, and they balance those things. Things can go a lot better.
Yeah, and Andrew talked about it last, I think, during our practice of like, if you don't do some of these things, like, yeah, you can maybe get get some, above that 5 million mark, and it might even be, the 5 million mark is kind of an arbitrary number, like might be 6 or 7 for your industry, whatever it is, but you're going to hit those impact zones, and if you got past that impact zone and stayed there for a long amount of time, guess what? You were there just because dumb luck. Right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey, we've run out of time a little bit, so I do want to leave time for Q&A. Andrew, do you have any questions that you see out there? I'll take a look here as well.
No questions today. I think we've just blown everybody out of their socks. So we should probably give them like the big benefit from joining this webinar. Yeah.
Absolutely. So QR code here to schedule some time to really go over some business goals and strategy and just start from the top. Even if it's something that you just need to vent, I would say. Like, this is a thing I'm not happy with in my business. This is a great opportunity to do this with Grant. He's heard it all, seen it all. Uh, been around a long time and is great at simplifying some of this complex stuff. So scan this QR code, schedule some time with Grant, and I promise you we'll get the value out of it, even if you don't end up working with Succurri, and they're happy to do it. So thank you so much. And again, don't forget, go out to YouTube. There's a ton of videos out there. We've been doing this for a couple of years now. So a lot of really great information on so many topics around IT and business growth for your business out there. And like and subscribe as always. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you. Have a great
Thank you,
day.
Tony.
See ya.